introduction to product software. Like I said before, this course could have also been named Software Industries, Business of Software, something along those lines. So here's the total structure of today's talk. I'll be talking about the economic context. I'll be giving you a definition of product software. Then we'll talk a little bit about these organizational structures. I already talked about the assignment earlier, and we'll be talking about different typical structures that you see. So you can see, for instance, a geographic division in a company saying, okay, these sales guys are working on the Asian market, these sales guys are working on the European market. Then you have a geographic structure. We'll get to some other structures later. Then some organizational variability, and then I'll give you a little bit of insight into NetAware. That's more of a fun thing towards the end. Alright, so here's a small example of a product software company called GX. GX Creative, I think it's called now. Well, they started with 8 students in sort of the foundation. It all started very early, I think in '92, with building websites for customers who were interested in this. They had no idea that this would be commercial entrepreneurship at this point. And they started as a foundation, also pretty open sourcey, a bit hackerish. And these guys were just having a lot of fun helping some very large customers getting their first websites. Well, now they've grown into a commercial organization. They started out with 8 guys, then they went from 8 to 6, then from 6 to 4. And, well, I think there's now 2 or 3 guys left. 125 employees, offices in Boston, Silicon Valley, and they're thinking about different offices in Europe. Oh, here it says 6 university students, should be 8. It's actually 8. The company itself was formed by 6. 2 of them got out and said, we're open source developers, we don't want to get commercial and crazy like that. So what do? They have a content management system which has been fairly successful, but as you all know, this market is nowadays a little bit changing. The market of open source content management systems are kind of taking over, and it's much easier to get a Joomla deployment up and running within a couple of hours, or a WordPress deployment in a couple of minutes, even as a SaaS, as a service online. But GX have found a new niche, and their new niche is to make it more effective, to get more from first visitor visit site to visitor purchase as a product. And there's a whole bunch of steps, and they try to do all kinds of traction, so they can show you a full, how do you call this, a sales pipeline, so to say, a sales funnel. So this is a very interesting company, a Dutch company, and I think for many of you this might even be a company where you can do your graduation project or something like that, get a job even. Alright, so in society, well, one of the reasons why we like giving this course so much is that it's, I mean, a software company is not like your average bakery or your average, and its main difference, I think, lies in the fact that about 30% of most expenditure in a company happens into research and development. So that really, you know, these are innovative companies. These guys are creating new ideas. These guys are creating very quickly new jobs and a lot of money. So these are very valuable companies for the industry. So yeah, I think I said most of those things, new products, services, social value. So on an international level, well, I think you know most of these names, or should know most of these names. The newest name that I added is Salesforce.com. I find that a very interesting company, practically the only company that is or not the only, but one of the most successful SaaS companies. And of course, on a national level, we also have a bunch of very interesting customers or companies. I mentioned Exact already. I mentioned Centric, but we also have Hives, we have Bibit doing some of the payment things, TomTom, of course, Planen, one of the up-and-comers. I think right now they are the quickest growing company in its size class. It's going very well. What they do is they build a facility management software, so that when a light bulb breaks here or something else breaks here, I can go into Planen and say, hey guys, light broke in room so-and-so, and then this can become a ticket for somebody to come by and fix it. Apparently this requires a lot of very difficult software. Talked about Unit 4. Unit 4 is a bit of an odd man out here. What they did was much like Centric. They looked at companies that were not doing so well, or were the number 1 or number 2 or 3 in a big market, and they said, hey, let's purchase these guys up. So Unit 4 now has about 60 products. And all these products are currently, well, under the guidance of Unit 4 and have been made profitable again. Alright, so we already talked a little bit about the definition of product software. So one thing we should talk about is what it is not. What it is not, it's not tailor-made software. So we shouldn't be talking, like I said before, about the Capgeminis, about the Deloittes, about the Accentures of this world, because all they do is they take existing software or create new software for you in sort of a one-off setting. I have some examples that are quite cool where a product grew out of one of these companies. Cision is one of the best examples of this, which grew out of Logica, became a very big company. Well, we're not talking about, I'm doing one assignment for a bank, or I built a content management system for my uncle, because that's a one-off. Now, if I sell it to my uncle and another aunt and another aunt, it's starting to look more and more like a product, and I have to start thinking about it as a product. It's also not embedded software, although in some cases you can have some doubts about it. Of course, embedded means, okay, I'm going to build some software for a washing machine, and of course, if this washing machine is sold 100 times, you could say that this embedded software is just product software. But it's not quite like that, because it's hard to update, it's hard to install new software, it's hard to replace it for competing washing machine controlling software. It's practically impossible. But of course, we all have now these devices in our pockets, and there's software, well, embedded on this, but there's also software that you can add to it later. So I'd say the embedded software that's on here is, well, not so much product software, whereas all the apps that you can install is product software again. Open source is again the same, it sort of follows the same type of life cycle, it follows the same development process. So there I'd say open source is again product software. And we will be studying the creation, production, organization of product software. So that's sort of the main topics we'll be talking about in this course. Well, here's a bit of an outdated way of looking at it, but it is still applicable. So here you have one customer, here you have multiple customers, there you have a device or no device. So here you see if it's, if it's just one piece of software you build for one insurance company, then it's tailor-made. If you build it for all insurance companies and you're trying to get FPTO to sign up, then it's product software. If it's on a device, it's embedded software, or a microprogram, if it's just for one big NASA shuttle or whatever. Here are some terms that are related to product software. I think I already mentioned it a little bit. Some of them, commercial software is a good term, packaged software, commercial off-the-shelf. That usually means that you'll be using a component and then using it or selling it to product software developers who then use it in their product. Shrink-wrapped software, well, that's of course referring to back in the day when everybody used to buy these nice boxes. So Exact Compact was one of these boxes, but also all these games. Even nowadays, games are still coming in these nice shrink-wrapped boxes, so to say. And of course, open source software, and here you see software-based services. I think now software-based services should be larger than all of these because we're going more and more to SaaS type things. All right, so our definition, this is the definition that Shaka came up with. So we call a software product a packaged configuration of software components or a software-based service with auxiliary materials which is released for and traded in a specific market. So let's talk about these red terms. Packaged, so you've put it all together, you're selling it off to a customer. Could be within your company that different departments are developing different components and shipping them together. It could also be that you're just shipping your product with a larger product. A good example of this, of course, is anyone making components for SAP. They have to sell both SAP and their component, or usually they'll sell their component to SAP customers. Another example of this is Stabiplan, a company here in Bodegraaf. What they build is software with which you can draw all kinds of air vents, heating, lighting, and all those things for builders. And then you can draw it beforehand, and then the builders can actually make it, realize it, and later on maintain the building based on these things. So you can even imagine that there's a coupling between Stabiplan and Plan. But that's something we'll be talking about more later. So this software, this is built based on AutoCAD. Many of you may know AutoCAD, the 3D drawing application. Thank you. So they have to sell both AutoCAD and Stabiplan together. And of course, since AutoCAD is twice or three times as expensive as Stabiplan, it's very interesting sales process. I mean, Autodesk, who are making AutoCAD, are very interested in these parties selling their product because they're making a lot of profit on it. And they just function as their salespeople. So packaged software components, well, I think that speaks for itself. Software-based service. Like I said before, we are going more and more into SaaS, so Exact Online is much more interesting than Exact Global or Exact Compact. Auxiliary materials, so those are extra materials that you may sell with the product, so this could be services. I know a company in the States called HubSpot. Whenever you buy their product, you get 4 hours of free consultants, phone consultancy, and many customers actually use this. But also other auxiliary materials, so it could be maybe a device, or it could be, I don't know, promotional materials. And of course, very important, a specific market. So you're not selling it to one customer, because one customer doesn't make a market, but if you have multiple customers, then we're talking about a market. Here you see some of the biggest categories of software. ERP software, I think, is at the very top. Bookkeeping, I find it quite interesting that almost every country has one bookkeeping firm that became very large in maybe 10, 20 years. So Exact is an example of this. QuickBooks is the product. I think it's now owned by Intuit or Inuit in the States. And every country, SAP of course in Germany, although SAP is the larger one. Operating systems, search engines, CAD software, which we just talked about, software development environments, hospital information systems. In the Netherlands we actually have a very successful hospital information system built by the guys called Chipsoft. And essentially all software you are using in daily life at work. So we haven't really mentioned them except for the navigation apps, but any app on here, I would call that product software as well. So what are the key differences? Why is this so interesting? Well, I think one of the main questions we should be talking about is the going to market. If you're building something for a customer, you would at some point say, hey, we think it's done, or here's our prototype, do you like it? And then they'll say, well, you need to change maybe 3 or 4 more things. And then you go through 1, 2, 3 more versions, and then that's it. And maybe you'll do some maintenance from there on. You move your development guys off of it. Maybe one guy will sort of keep things in his brain for when a bug appears, and he can fix it, but that's about it. Now for product software, it's of course much different. Because there you can maybe release every year, or every half a year, or in the case of Word Feud and those other games every week. Ruzzle, I think, is one that comes out every week with an update. So that's one thing. So this sort of coordinating with the whole company. Okay, next week we have a new version coming out, and the whole company pushes towards it. And it's usually quite an exciting time in the software market. So installation and usage in different organizations with different hardware and software platforms. So like TomTom, it needs to work on your iPhone, it needs to work on this, it needs to work on those embedded devices, it needs to work on PDAs. My God, these poor guys, they have to develop for all these different platforms. And the same holds for if you're just building an Android app. You need to keep into account that sometimes the screen is like this, sometimes the screen is like this, sometimes it's larger, sometimes you're working on, what do you call those things, a tablet. So, you know, it's even quite hard. But even if you're building a web service, you still need to keep into account that 90% of people are still using like IE6, Internet Explorer 6, which again creates difference. So most of the websites that are built nowadays have in the CSS code, if it's Internet Explorer do this, if it's Firefox do that, even though HTML should be standard. Oh, and of course also very interesting, the vendor company is the owner of the IP. So Apple owns, well not here, but the Google guys own, that's only in part true, a large part of the Android kernel. That's, you know, they own that. I don't own it, even though I have it in my hand right now. Android's actually a bad example because a large part of that are open source. And the usage is licensed to customers. So you say, okay, you want to use this, pay me per month, or you want to use this, pay me a lump sum, and then you have internal usage rights. Alright, so this is the picture I was talking about earlier. I'm trying to sort of structure the lectures of the course in this framework, and it works fairly well. There's sort of a bottom part to it and a top part to it. So the bottom part, you see the complete software development lifecycle, from requirements management to developing an architecture to delivering to implementing the product. Interestingly enough, this is usually forgotten. Like I said before, you will not believe how frequently it happens that a big company buys a piece of software, installs it on a server, and forgets about it. And every year they get a renewal license, and at some point they go, have we ever used it? No? Then let's scratch it again. Well, that's obviously a problem because the product software company wants their software to be used, right? Not just to be bought, which, you know, makes the heater burn, but also to be used. So there's different parts to this. Of course, well, for development you have testing, you have defect handling, For delivering, well, how do you plan it? Documentation, what about a beta version? So these are all very practical operational things. And then you can go a level higher, and then you come to corporate strategy, product strategy, and service strategy. Service strategy in this case not meaning SaaS strategy, but more how do we support our product? How do we help people implement our product? How do we help people use our product? Do we give them access to certain data sources if they're using our product? A typical example of this might be like a postal code database. These postal code databases are they are updated every once in a while, and you want your product always to be the most up to date. So how do you work these things out? I can talk way too long. So then at the top we also have product strategy. We talked about that perhaps a little bit already. Portfolio analysis. We talked about unit 4 with their 60 products. Well, of course, out of those 60 products, there are some products that are making most of the profit, and there are some products that are maybe even making a loss. So the question is, at the end of the year, what do you do to that product? Do you want to keep that in your portfolio, or do you at some point want to say to the manager of that particular team, like, hey, how would you like to own your own business? And do you think you could make it more profitable, or drag it above a certain percentage of profitability? Very interesting questions. So this is sort of, once you know this framework, and you can tell me a little bit about each of these particular topics, I think you have your knowledge of the class quite well. Are there any questions at this point about the class or the course? Are you missing any topics, or did you expect to see something?